Hello and welcome to Keep Right On, a Birmingham City podcast from Birmingham Live. I'm Brian Dick, and I'm joined today in the wake of Wayne Rooney's departure from Birmingham City by our Nottingham Forest writer, or Nottinghamshire Live's Nottingham Forest writer, I should say, Sarah Clapson. Hi, Sarah.
Hello, good to be on.
Yeah, thanks very much for joining us. Now, a few of you might be wondering what interest we have in Nottingham Forest on here, but obviously most of you will understand that Steve Cooper is the bookmaker's favourite for the Blues hot seat. And in a quick sort of straw poll we've run on the Birmingham Mail website, regarding who fans would like to succeed Rooney, we've had about just over 2,000 responses, and Steve Cooper is the runaway leader on that. So that's why we've got Sarah on. Sarah watched pretty much every game of Steve Cooper's tenure at the City Ground, and I'm going to call it a miracle, taking Forest from the bottom of the Championship into the Premier League in a single season. Whether Sarah agrees with that description, we'll find out in a minute. But yeah, Sarah, thanks for joining us. Is miracle overstating what Cooper did at the City Ground?
No, I don't think it is. When you look at where Forest were when he came in and the state that they were heading for League One. No question about that. Under Chris Hughton's tenure, they were only going one way. And Steve Cooper completely transformed the club, transformed results, did what nobody else had done this century and got Forest into the Premier League. So many other managers had tried and failed, but he was the one that did it. And I think it is absolutely fair to call it a miracle. And you could argue that actually he went one better the following season by keeping Forest in the Premier League. That was arguably an even greater achievement because of all the challenges and because of everything that went with it that season. He had two absolutely incredible years in charge of Forest. This season wasn't quite at the same level, but prior to that, it had been nothing but success, really. Two really special seasons in charge.
Fantastic. Right, so just paint a picture for us, please, Sarah, then. How bad were Forest now? I've done a little bit of research. They were bottom of the Championship under Chris Hughton. I think something like 7 points from 4 games, or was it 4 points from 7 games? One of the two. How bad was it? Because I remember thinking back from the outside looking in, they just seemed to be absolutely stalled under Hughton, and there was problems with the style. Obviously, the results were terrible. How bad was it?
It was dire. Absolutely dire. I think sometimes you can forget that now because of where they are and how quickly they've transformed into a Premier League club in that space of time. But they really were heading for League One under Chris Hughton. It wasn't just the results, it was the whole atmosphere had turned toxic. Fans had really turned against him, against the team. The atmosphere in the stands just wasn't good at all. Results were not happening. The players didn't look like they were a team. They weren't performing to their best level. Forest were in a lot of trouble. They were in relegation trouble, no question about that. And Steve Cooper just transformed it. He dragged them up by the bootstraps and completely overhauled the whole way that they approached games, the whole unity in the squad. And he didn't just do that. He made such a difference off the pitch as well. It's hard to kind of to put into words the difference that he made to the city as well as to the football club. He just got Forest and he got Nottingham as a city, and that just had a massive impact on the pitch as well. Once he'd galvanised the fans, once he'd galvanised the team, it was just a complete upward curve, really. That Championship promotion winning season was just incredible to witness. From where Forest were to where they got to it was awesome.
Yeah, just have checked. It was 4 points from 7 games, so you're absolutely right. They were headed in the wrong direction. What was the first thing he targeted, Sarah? What was sort of the first thing on his agenda? So many managers come in and talk about defensive solidity and get building from the back. Is that what Cooper did, or did he go about it in a different way?
He did that, but I think a key part of his early press conferences was, we're Nottingham Forest, we have to play like Nottingham Forest. And he wanted the team to get on the front foot, to represent the football club in the way that he thought was right, and something that Forest had been known throughout in their history is being positive. playing good football. And he really wanted the players to start believing in themselves. And it's so easy when managers come in to say, I want the players to start believing, I want belief. And that is a massive factor. And it's really hard to put your finger on how they do that. But he just lifted spirits, and he got players playing to their potential. He got Forest playing an attacking style, which they weren't doing under Chris Hughton. The football under Chris Hughton was pretty dour, and it obviously wasn't getting the right results either. Steve Cooper changed all that. He got them playing on the front foot. He got them believing that they were a good group, and they were. They did have some talented players, but I think he got them playing to more than the sum of their parts, because of he's such a good man manager. He's so good at putting an arm around players if they need it, and really creating a bond and a sense of unity. He didn't just do that with the dressing room, he did that with the fans as well. So he established a connection between the players, the fans, the players amongst themselves, the whole club. He united everybody, and it just had a massive effect on the pitch. Once you have that kind of bond and everybody's on the same page, it just then translated into results and performances, and it obviously ended up in winning promotion via the playoffs.
Yeah. Just looking at was it Millwall? Was that his first game, a 1-1 home draw? Is that right?
I think it was. Yeah, I think it was.
Then they won the next 4, lost at home to Fulham, who were just killing everybody in that season. Then there were quite a few draws, and then it just became a winning machine, didn't it? Through the into 2022, it became an absolute steamroll. What point did you think that, hang on, we could be onto something special here?
It was, I remember it very vividly. It was an away game at Bristol City, and Forest were 1-0 down until, I want to say, in added time, and they turned it round with 2 really quick goals by Lyle Taylor, who didn't have the best of times, particularly under Steve Cooper. Other than that was really his kind of shining moment. But it was that, and I remember it was absolutely pouring down with rain. It was a miserable night away at Ashton Gate, and Forest looked like they were on course for a defeat. They turned it around. I think it was in the space of 2 minutes or something, and it was just that, wow, that was a turning point, because a few weeks ago, a few months prior to that, Forest wouldn't have been capable of turning around a game like that in added time. No chance. But then you thought, well, they've got this belief. They equalised. All of a sudden, the players ran back, restarted, went up the other end and scored again. And it kind of thought, well, that looks like they're onto something here. It looks like Steve Cooper's really instilled something. And you're right, once the turn of the new year happened, they just kept winning. And what was really key was he used cup games. So many times managers come in and they see FA Cup games as a chance to play the kids or play some fringe players, or maybe try a few different things. But Steve Cooper was really clear that this is a chance to build momentum. These games are a chance to keep this winning mentality. He always referred to that you can't turn it on and off. You have to constantly want to win. And those cup games were a chance to do that. And Forest went on a magnificent FA Cup run as well. That helped in the league. They did that last season as well in the Carabao Cup. He just sees them as a platform, as just a chance to get more results, get more momentum, and keep that, refer to it again, that belief building. And again, that's something that not all managers do. And it was a real sea change, I think.
Yeah, just that Bristol City game you've referred to. I've just found it. It's listed on Soccerbase as a Lyle Taylor equalised in the 90th minute, and then a Lyle Taylor penalty in the 90th minute. So it was absolutely a game spun on its head. And what Blues fans know about Lyle Taylor is that when he's got a penalty, he tends to score it. So really interesting stuff. So Forest rampage through the rest of the season. They get into the playoffs. Did you feel, was there a sense of inevitability? Just, they always say that one team charges into the playoffs and then charges straight through the playoffs. Did it feel that way?
Forest have such bad luck in the playoffs prior to this. They have a horrible record. So I think there was always let's not get too carried away.
Right.
from the fans because they know what's gone before, and particularly against Sheffield United, they'd been there and experienced the other side of it. When they went to Bramall Lane for the first leg of the semi-final, they got a good result and they looked in a really good position, and you thought, well, they're in with a real chance here of making it to the final. Came back to the City Ground for the second leg, took the lead, but then it kind of fell apart a bit, and Sheffield United came back, went to penalties. Even in the penalty shootout, I think there was still a lot of nerves and a sense of, have Forest done a Forest? Have they blown it?
Yeah.
But that penalty shootout was something special. It was the way that they actually managed to get to the penalty shootout in the first place. The City Ground roar, the atmosphere there, the fans really got the players over the line, and then they did it again in the penalty shootout. And after that, I think there was a real sense of going to the final then, of thinking, well, Forest are in with a real chance, that this has got to be their moment. It's got to be their time. You can never kind of say it with any degree of conviction because we all know how football works. But I think there was a real sense that if they played to their potential in the final against Huddersfield, they had a real shot at it. In the end, it wasn't a great game. In fact, it was far from that. But they got over the line. And again, it was another incredible occasion, being at Wembley and putting those playoff demons to bed. Because as I said, Forest had a horrible record in the playoffs, and they just transformed that with Steve Cooper in charge.
Yeah, there's the one thing you've mentioned now, which is it really interested me, and it sort of kind of carried on into the Premier League, didn't it? Was the atmosphere at the City Ground and the home form, which hasn't been great this season, obviously, but the City Ground just seemed to come alive when Steve Cooper was there. How is that true, and how did he do it, and how valuable was that?
Yeah, it's absolutely true, and it was goosebumps a lot of the time. The atmosphere was just incredible, and again, I refer to the period before that under Chris Hughton when it was completely toxic. But even under previous managers, I don't think the City Ground had ever been quite as loud, quite as vociferous, quite as electrifying as what it was when Steve Cooper came in and just galvanised it. The fans played such a massive part in that promotion winning season. And again, last season in keeping Forest up. And a lot of that was down to Steve Cooper. It was the bond that he established with the supporters, the fact that he engaged with fans. He always took time out to speak to fans. There are so many examples of stories where he initiated contact, or fans would go and stand at the training ground to meet the players, and if they were there on a cold day, Steve Cooper would make sure they had a hot drink, or he'd write a letter to some. And I've even heard tales of him ringing some of them up, and he just got Forest, he got the club, and he got the city. Forest, because of all the history and because of everything that Forest have about them, that gets to some managers. So some managers feel that it's a burden having that Brian Clough legacy, that European Cup winning legacy, and that they don't use it in the right way. Steve Cooper turned it on his head, and he used it to help Forest. He embraced it. He didn't let it smother the team. He talked about standing on the shoulders of giants and using that, and fans really appreciated that. Somebody that got the history, got everything that came with being manager of Nottingham Forest, and he's a really genuinely good guy, Steve Cooper. He's such a humble man who just really appreciates the supporters and the fans, and I think that the bond they had was special. It really was. The bond between Steve Cooper and the supporters, and the atmosphere that followed was just, it was electric. It really did make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up sometimes. It was just that good. He always liked to celebrate victories with fist pumps, Steve Cooper. So he did the old Jurgen Klopp triple fist pump, and went round all four stands, applauded every section of the supporters. Away end, he'd always make sure that Forest went over, win, lose or draw, to applaud the fans. And what really stands out in the latter end of his tenure is the 5-0 thumping that Forest had at Fulham the other week. They were absolutely abysmal that night. They were dreadful. It was the worst point of Steve Cooper's tenure, without a shadow of a doubt. It would have been so easy for him. He was under a lot of pressure. He was, his job was on the line. It would have been so easy for him to walk off, for the players to walk off, hanging their heads in shame, tails between the legs, not acknowledge the fans, or at least, maybe give a half-hearted applause. But he made sure they went there and stood in front of them. And I think they were maybe expecting a bit of abuse or a bit of flack from it, which quite right after you've been thumped 5-0. But the opposite happened. Fans, I think it had the feeling of a goodbye at the time. Fans wanted to show that it hasn't ended the way that everybody wanted, but still appreciated the job that he did. Still had a lot of love and affection for him, and he got a great reception. But even if he hadn't been expecting that, he made sure that the players stood in front of the fans and acknowledged that they'd messed up, that they hadn't played anywhere near what they could do. And he held his hand up and said sorry. And I think that says a lot about him as a manager and as about a person, really. He's a really humble guy.
Just pressed for time, so I think we're going to sort of brush over the first season in the Premier League, which is probably slightly unfair because you said it was probably a greater achievement than getting up to the Championship. But just the facts of the matter are that he had to integrate 30 new players and integrate them into a team to stay in the Premier League for the first time in a quarter of a century. So it's slightly unfair to brush over that. But it was, I mean, if the first bit was a miracle, that was a miracle too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an even greater achievement than getting Forest up in the first place because of all the challenges that went with it. Yeah,
indeed. At the risk, this is becoming a bit of a love letter to Steve Cooper, isn't it? And had it all gone well, he'd still be there now. When and where did it start to go wrong, and what do you think he maybe would look back on and say, well, I should have probably done that a bit differently?
This season, Forest wanted progress. They have a really ambitious owner who has made no bones about the fact that he wants Forest. He actually said he wanted them to be a dominant force in English football. Rightly or wrongly, realistically or not, that's what he wants. Yeah. So Steve Cooper was always really on a bit of a hiding to nothing this term. He was always going to be under pressure at the slightest hint of results not going the right way. He was under pressure a lot last season as well. He could have lost his job on a couple of occasions. This season particularly, because Forest wanted to not just consolidate, but move on up the table. As soon as it looked like that wasn't going to happen, pressure started to build. Right. Results then didn't come. I mean, only he'll know, but whether the pressure got to him a little bit and it affected decisions, substitutions, team selection, that kind of thing, it looked like it did from the outside. Right. I think when you're under that much pressure and there's so much riding on you, it can affect your thinking a little bit. You maybe don't see things quite so clearly. He was so desperate to get results that he resorted to be more defensive, and Forest went into their shell a little bit, which is not what they had done in the Championship previously. And fans then didn't exactly like the style of play. It wasn't what they wanted. Having Forest been so keen to evolve this season and be a bit more progressive, to then revert to being a bit more defensive probably wasn't what fans, owner hierarchy expected. Didn't get the results as well necessarily to go with it. And it kind of went from a season that looked like it could be encouraging at the start. Forest put in some decent performances, but didn't get the results. And then it just gradually tailed off. And then all of a sudden it looked like they were going to be in relegation trouble again. And that's very much not what the owner has in mind.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Just as a couple of sort of general points, did he have a sort of a preferred setup, a formation he wanted to get to, just as a sort of a standing principle of his that he thought was the best setup?
I think there's two different ones. In the Championship, he liked to play with wing backs, so a 3-man defence with wing backs.
Right.
In the Premier League, Forest did start that way. This season, though, he really wanted them to be a 4-man back team.
Right.
So he can be a bit flexible. I think the Championship probably really suited the system that Forest played. And the Premier League, he found it a little bit difficult maybe to navigate what was going to work and what wouldn't. Last season, Forest tried a few different formations, and again, the fact they had so many signings and so many players to integrate didn't help, but trying to find a settled team and the right system was tricky. And it kind of carried over a little bit this year as well. So he can adapt. I think in the Championship particularly, he certainly found a way of playing that suited Forest and that got results.
Yeah, but all the variables moved, didn't they, after promotion? And you've made reference to all the transfers, certainly in that first summer, with 30 new players arriving over the summer and January window. How much say on recruitment did Cooper have, Sarah?
Forest are a funny club when it comes to things like that. He did have a bit of a say. There were some signings that were Cooper signings, or that certainly were players that he particularly liked. Morgan Gibbs-White being one this season, or last season, I should say. Other times, Forest have a few different people that play a part in recruitment, and perhaps they didn't all necessarily fit what Steve Cooper liked or wanted. So I think he does have players that he likes to work with, particularly. But Forest are maybe different to other clubs in how they operate in terms of recruitment. Right.
Okay. So it sounds as though there's a few cooks in the kitchen on that front. Then, from what you said there, without putting words in your mouth, just finally, then. So we've painted a picture of Cooper as a man who embraces a club history, as somebody who likes to turn the home stadium into a bit of a fortress, and who's got a track record of getting teams into the Championship playoffs. I fear you're about to burst our bubble, Sarah. What chances have Birmingham City got of tempting Steve Cooper to St Andrews?
I think Steve Cooper has had 2 seasons, or a season and a bit now, in the Premier League. He has shown that he can get results in the top flight. I'd be surprised, I think, if he went back down to the Championship at this point, particularly as he does have a few Premier League admirers. I think he would probably feel that he can do a job again in the Premier League, and I suspect he might wait for one of those jobs to come up. He obviously has shown he can do it in the Championship as well, and I guess you can never say never to things, but I would be surprised, I think.
Yeah, okay. Never mind. Well,
sorry. It's
wherever he lives, whether it's in Wales or Nottingham. I've already volunteered to piggyback into the city ground. So if he does fancy it, then transport won't be an issue. Sarah, it's taken up so much of your time. Thank you very much for your time here today. Thank you all for listening. Remember, you can follow the Keep Right On podcast on Spotify or on YouTube. So thanks again, everybody, for your interest, and it's a Keep Right On.